This video was supposed to come out a month ago, but I've been busy, so allow it. I'm sure at this point, you've seen some video by some YouTuber talking about how Overwatch 2 bad, or Overwatch 2 is dying, or Overwatch 2 is failing, or some other fear-mongering narrative pushed by content creators that you either watch or ones that you know of. Master Ian Gamer, Flats, Samito, Stylosa, Your Overwatch, Nateson, and hell, even myself at one point. The point of this video isn't to downplay or ignore the critiques that these creators talk about with Overwatch, and in fact, I'm not going to spend too long analysing each and one of their points, but rather, I want to look at the game holistically and not in a vacuum. But let's begin with the meat and potatoes of this video first, the actual criticism that creators levied against Overwatch, and the idea that some critique is more valid and significant than others. Here's a popular film YouTuber that you may even watch, Cosmonaut Variety Hour, talking about how he categorizes criticism and will slot in the relevant issues with Overwatch why he fits.
I like to file criticism under one of three categories. The first is, yes, this is valid criticism. You are correct.
By far, probably one of the most embarrassing patches I've ever seen. Like, Sojourn is literally buffed with a Mercy Pocket now.
A lot of popular community figures are talking about the matchmaking in Overwatch 2. From my own personal experience, I don't really know what happened, but this has to be the least fun I've ever consistently had with the matchmaking.
You probably should not be getting plats on your team if you're a GM player or a Masters player if they have a plat on the other team. Especially when there's one less player in the game, the matchmaker should be easier, and yet somehow it took 3 steps back.
The survivorship bias in this scenario comes from Alec failing to recognize that there are a huge amount of people who are never picking Mercy because she wasn't in a good place in the game. He's only looking at people who are picking her, which is only looking at the best of the best Mercies at any given skill rank.
The second is, no, that's not valid criticism. You are wrong.
I think most of us can agree that Overwatch PvP multiplayer has become a thing of the past. Much like Halo, as much as we love it, the world has just moved on without it.
But she was, again, marketed as a DPS support, and actually the worst way to play her is by trying to go and do a lot of DPS.
If you go down to 5v5 in a role queue format, you've watered down your game even more, and it just feels boring, to be honest with you. It's just boring to play, it lacks depth, and it's just a hollow shell for your average Timmy to come on and play at like after work.
The third is, yeah, you're right, but like, it's not that big a deal, so get over it.
New players are coming to see weapon inspects in the Overwatch 2 trailers, and then they come to the game and find out that they're not even added yet. What is that? Why are we marketing a game for people to come play when features in the commercials are not even in the game?
Don't care. But Overwatch 2 is currently in what you might call a state of emergency, which is that the Overwatch 2 seasonal events kinda suck. Don't care, still don't care.
And the fact it takes 5 years worth of playing to free-to-play grind Kariko's cosmetics and that whole big Reddit thread is hilarious. That's just Blizzard slapping us in the face.
What'd you say? Just stop. I just want to know what you said. What did you say? I don't care!
This third category might seem a little odd to you. If criticism is valid, then how can it not be a big deal? Well, usually it means that the criticism is what people would call nitpicking. I'm gonna keep talking to you guys like your children because my comment section on Star Wars videos is pretty fucked up.
In essence, the most important pieces of critique at the moment are hero balance, ranked matchmaking, and locking new heroes behind the battle pass. I'm sorry, but if you're crying about an overpriced cosmetic that has no bearing on your gameplay experience, please do me a favour and get outside. Now, what new perspective do I have to offer? What is my take on all of this? Well, hot take, but I think that even with the Category 1 valid critique that Overwatch has, I still think it's in a pretty decent state. I still think it's fundamentally a good game, and it's nowhere near in this spiraling downward trajectory that these content creators want you to believe that the game's in. The only reason why these creators make these hyperbolic, exaggerated videos is to get views. Now, this doesn't mean they haven't got valid points, because some certainly do, but most of the time when creators talk about how bad the game is, their videos do 2 or 3 times their normal view count, so they'll hyper-focus on it. And this is just how humans work. We see something negative in the news, we're more likely to click on it and watch it. Now, I do want to quickly address the Category 2 and Category 3 levels of criticism, and why it's either incorrect, or they just don't matter. Playstyle and hero design. This is specific to Kiriko, but I'll also talk about Ramattra too. Kiriko has a ton of playstyles, as you'll know if you've watched my Kiriko guides. Yes, Kiriko's ultimate was and is very strong, and she was played for that in the Overwatch League, but in ranked, it depends. If you're playing Kiriko and you're playing against low mobility ranged heroes like Ana, Widow or Hanzo, you can't just heal bots. You need to take angles and surgically assassinate these heroes, which should be somewhat easy against Widow due to her reduced movement speeds. Now with Ramotra, his playstyle on release wasn't very fun or intuitive. According to those in contenders, he was just mainly played as a block bot since he lacks range, sustain and mobility, so that's a fair critique. But after his changes, buffing his mobility and sustain, his playstyle is now a lot more intuitive. 6v6 is better than 5v5. The problems with 5v5 right now are mainly due to bad matchmaking and or balance, or a combination of both. 5v5 generally helps queue times, it gives the player more individual autonomy over their own gameplay, while still retaining team play aspects, and helps differentiate Overwatch 2 from Overwatch 1. If you think Overwatch 2 is completely watered down because it went from 5v5 to 6v6, I don't really know what to say to you. Overwatch PvP is falling off like Halo. Yeah, this just isn't the case, and is a bad faith comparison. Also, just adding this edit in here, I forgot to talk about push. I'm sure you've seen a video that claimed to mathematically explain why push bad, and push certainly has its flaws, but I don't think it's anywhere near as bad as people say. Spolo made a video reacting to the push critique, so I recommend watching that, but in short, most issues with push carry over to King of the Hill, and the main issue specific to push is that you have to win consecutive teamfights in some cases, which can feel pretty bad. Spolo supposedly had a contenders analyst confirm to him that first fight in King of the Hill actually dictate the rest of the map more than the first fight in push. Now onto category 3, the overpriced shop. Yeah, sure, it's not really fair to price old skins at $20, but who cares, man? In fact, you're saving money by not spending anything at all for skins that have no impact on your gameplay. If these were $3 or $5, you'd actually be wasting more money on things that don't matter. Use that money to stay on the self-improvement grinds. Weapon interactions / false marketing. In Nathan's case with weapon inspects not being in the game yet, I don't think anyone wants to play Overwatch 2 for new weapon inspects. Like, in principle, you're right, but it doesn't really affect you or the customer. With regards to the broader point about false marketing though, and Overwatch 2 just being an Overwatch 1 update, I do think this point holds a bit more weight and is certainly valid. But for now, we just need to wait until PvE comes out. That's where a significant majority of resources and time have gone into to help make Overwatch 2, well, Overwatch 2. So yeah, Overwatch 2 is just kind of a big balance patch, but the real meat and potatoes are being a bit overlooked here. Unfortunately, I don't think the devs had a choice in splitting up the PvE and PvP side of Overwatch 2, and if they were released all at once, then I think the community perception might be different. Seasonal events. Sure, seasonal events have been pretty dry right now and they're certainly repetitive, but this links onto the last point with PvE, and I think the devs are trying to churn that out as fast as they can. We've just had the Lunar event and there's barely anything new, but if you look at Team 4 and the resources they have and where they should be spending them, for the long term, bigger picture and looking at things more holistically, they should be spending as much time as they can getting that PvE out. Think of it like an instant versus delayed gratification kind of thing. So with the category 1 critiques that I think are more important and kind of need to be addressed now, balance and especially ranked matchmaking are in a pretty dire state, but I want to quickly say this. The executive producer for Overwatch 2 has already acknowledged the main issues surrounding the game. It's not like the devs aren't aware of the issues in Overwatch 2 right now, and that the game is going to die within 2 months, which some people may want you to believe. So with balance at the moment is actually better than I think most people give the team credit for. At the time, a month ago, when people were making their Overwatch bad videos, Sojourn was absolutely busted, and people definitely had the right to complain about that. Right now, she's still pretty strong and definitely top 3 DPS, but I think all heroes right now are without a doubt playable or even one-trickable even if they're niche. I'm sure CarQ would back this up, considering in his top 500 tier list, he didn't have a single hero as unplayable. There is one exception though, and that is with Sombra, but barring that, balance isn't actually too bad. It is still relatively slow, but there's going to be a new set of Hog changes and probably Sojourn Mercy changes as of the release of this video, which will likely remove his one-shot in exchange for a buff to Hook or some added team utility. Hopefully when PvE gets released, the team can focus more on PvP and getting those updates out faster. Matchmaking, however, is where the real issue lies. If my memory does me well, SVB and frankly a bunch of other content creators have rightly been pointing out the state of matchmaking, and especially in a mode like 5v5 where, as SVB points out, you can really feel the effect of a bad teammate compared to 6v6, matchmaking really needs to be on point. One possible argument I anticipate is that these issues by themselves aren't too big to deal with, but as a whole, they make the game unplayable. To use an analogy, the game is like a bottle that's about to burst. A bottle half full is manageable, but as soon as you start adding more and more issues, they start to compile and compound and become unmanageable. But here's the thing, these issues are temporary, they can be fixed over time, and the devs have the awareness and power to do so. Look at balance for example. A month ago, Surgeon was busted out the wazoo, and now, whilst she still is pretty strong, she's nowhere near as bad as she was a month ago, which shows that these issues can be fixed over time because they are temporary, and they aren't really fundamental issues with Overwatch itself. I will say that one issue that can't really be fixed is that of heroes being locked behind the battle pass through both a pay and play wall. A somewhat realistic solution to this is to lower the tier the hero gets unlocked at, ideally in the 20s or 30s, but the devs have already lowered Ramattra from 10 tiers compared to Kiriko. Whilst other games like Valorant, Apex and Rainbow Six Siege do lock their heroes behind both play and pay walls, this obviously isn't ideal, especially if you can't get the hero before it's unlocked in comp. But as a result, I just don't really get the overall fearmongering or the exaggeration some creators have towards the game right now. Sure, could they fix the game faster? Without a doubt. Should more resources be put into PvP? Well, that depends in terms of how far they are into developing PvE right now, and that we don't know. And looking at the bigger picture further, look at games like Rainbow Six Siege. That game barely, if ever, reaches 5-digit viewership on Twitch, competitively unviable on both console and PC due to a swath of cheaters. I think we as an Overwatch community can and should be grateful for what we have, whilst also acknowledging that there are issues that do need to be fixed, and fixed promptly. And I think that's a reasonable and nuanced take to have. I would end off the video here, but I just want to briefly cover the 2021 NDA, where content creators were hyping up Overwatch 2 like crazy back in December 2021, and now there's really complete silence. I don't think this is the fault from the creators themselves, but as Manifolder and Spylo say, it's likely that Blizzard were overpromising and underdelivering. The content creators way back in the 2021 meeting were likely overhyped and were expecting way more, which may explain their frustration. Well, that's it for the video. Let me know your thoughts down below, and until next time.